Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We all know the everyday pain of, say, a stubbed toe or a bad burn, right? But today, we're going way, way beyond our mundane fears. We're going to use rigorous science, medical data, and historical records to map out the extreme physiological stressors that truly push the human body and mind to their absolute limits. We often wonder just how much the human machine can endure before it completely breaks down. Well, the dodo we're looking at today paints an incredible, albeit pretty harrowing, picture of human endurance, pain, and survival. To map out this journey, we'll be looking at 5 distinct vectors of suffering: ancient torment, the worst medical pains, surviving a space vacuum, nerve agents, and finally, the edge of death. Section 1. Ancient torment, the brazen bull. We are starting our journey in ancient Greece during the 6th century BC, with the tyrant Phalaris of Achragos, Sicily, and a device that engineered human suffering from the outside in. Just listen to this chilling quote from its inventor, a man named Paralaus of Athens. He said, "His screams will come to you through the pipes as the tenderest, most pathetic, most melodious of bellowings." I mean, that really reveals the sadistic acoustic design at play here. It wasn't just about physical destruction, it was literally an instrument meant to manipulate sound. But historically, there's this deeply ironic twist. The tyrant Phalaris was reportedly so disgusted by this pitch that he actually tricked Paralaus into testing the horn system himself. Paralaus was locked inside, a fire was lit, and, well, even though he was pulled out before dying, Phalaris then just had him thrown off a high cliff. The reality of this device was absolutely horrifying. It was a hollow bronze statue where victims were, quite literally, roasted to death by a fire built underneath. The engineering was specifically designed so that steam from the victim's cooking flesh would exit the bull's nostrils, and to make it worse, that smoke was masked by spicy clouds of incense. According to legend, it was an execution method so infamous that early Christian martyrs like St. Eustace under Emperor Hadrian and St. Antipas were reportedly executed within its scorching metal walls. Section 2. The worst medical pains, the agony of creeping internal illness. Now, while the brazen bull used extreme heat from the outside, some of the absolute worst pain humans can experience actually comes from the inside, and it often stems from completely everyday illnesses. Ironically, your body is actually better prepared to handle a sudden bear attack or a car crash than a slow-building illness. Why? Well, physiologically, sudden trauma triggers a massive rush of adrenaline and other hormones that temporarily deadens the pain, effectively putting you in a state of shock to protect you. But creeping illnesses and diseases, they completely bypass those chemical defenses. They build gradually, offering zero shock protection, and leave your nervous system completely exposed to unrelenting agony. So the National Health Service actually lists these specific internal conditions as some of the most debilitating pain experiences possible for a human being. And remember, these aren't exotic tortures from history. They're everyday conditions people live with right now, which makes them uniquely terrifying. We're looking at things like the agonizing passing of mineral deposits in kidney stones, or cluster headaches, which cause sudden, excruciating pain centered around the eye. There's trigeminal neuralgia, characterized by chronic, intense facial nerve pain, and endometriosis, where tissue forms outside the uterine wall, causing incredibly painful cysts. Because there's no adrenaline shield to protect you, these internal creeping conditions literally push the human nervous system to its absolute limits. Moving on to Section 3, Surviving the Space Vacuum, the Physics and Biology of Depressurization. Let's move to a completely different extreme and look at an environmental torment. The ultimate hostile environment, the vacuum of space. I always love clearing up misconceptions, and popular culture gets space exposure completely wrong. Movies rely on sensationalism, showing people instantly exploding or freezing solid the second a spaceship door opens. But aerospace medicine tells a very different story. The biological reality is a complex, rapidly lethal interplay of physics and biology that is actually entirely focused on severe oxygen deprivation, rather than spontaneous combustion or freezing. Let's map out exactly what happens. Step 1, consciousness is lost within mere seconds of exposure because the oxygen is immediately stripped from your blood. Step 2, you enter a terrifyingly strict 90-second survival window. If you are repressurized within this minute-and-a-half countdown, survival is possible. But step 3, if those precious 90 seconds expire, rapidly lethal asphyxiation and injury occur. And this precise timeline isn't just theory, it's proven by stark historical data, including the near-fatal vacuum chamber accident of NASA technician Jim LeBlanc and the tragic depressurization of the Soyuz 11 spacecraft, both of which fundamentally altered how we design modern spacesuits. Section 4. The Horror of Nerve Agents. Chemical Warfare at the Microscopic Level. Zooming in from the vast empty environmental pressure of space down to the microscopic synapses inside the human body, we encounter our fourth extreme, the terrifying world of chemical nerve agents. To understand these devastating weapons, we first have to understand acetylcholinesterase. Think of it, quite simply, as the biological off switch for your muscles. Normally, a nerve tells a muscle to flex by sending a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. Once the flex is done, this enzyme comes in, cleans up the chemical, and allows the muscle to relax. So here is what goes wrong during a nerve agent attack. Step 1. The toxic agent acts like a permanent superglue, irreversibly binding to that crucial enzyme and completely neutralizing it. Step 2. Without the enzyme to clean it up, the trigger chemical, acetylcholine, massively builds up. Step 3 triggers what's called a cholinergic crisis. This means your muscles receive continuous impulses and physically cannot relax. And step 4 is the horrific result, rapid paralysis leading to death by asphyxiation or cardiac arrest in mere minutes. This is accompanied by involuntary urination, convulsions, and intense respiratory failure. Comparing two distinct classes of these agents reveals just how brutally military science advanced over the 20th century. It's genuinely horrifying when you think about it. First, we have the G-series, discovered in the 1930s. These are highly volatile agents like sarin and taboon. They evaporate quickly into aerosols and are primarily lethal when inhaled. Then, developed in the 1950s, we have the V-series. These are persistent agents like VX. They resemble thick oils that linger in the environment for long periods and kill upon contact with the skin. You'd literally need full-body hazmat protection just to survive exposure to them. Mapping out this dark timeline neutrally shows the prolific global mechanization of these chemicals. It starts in 1936 with the discovery of taboon by I.G. Farben in Nazi Germany. By the 1950s, V-series agents were created. From the 1960s through the 90s, the Soviet Union developed Novichok agents specifically to bypass NATO chemical detection gear. And tragically, in 1984, Iraq became the first country to deploy these agents in warfare, leading to the horrific Halabja massacre. Now, while these weapons were globally banned by the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention, recent assassinations and their use in the Syrian civil war prove they absolutely still remain an active threat. Fortunately, modern medicine hasn't stood still, and we've developed a specific combination of countermeasures. First up is atropine, which blocks the receptors that are being overloaded. Second is pralidoxime chloride, also known as 2-PAM-chlor, which attempts to pry the poison off the affected enzyme to reactivate it. Diazepam is used to manage violent seizures and reduce brain damage risk. Finally, butyrylcholinesterase is an in-development prophylactic enzyme that acts as a sort of sponge in the bloodstream to catch the poison early. Militaries often carry the first two in autoinjectors for immediate use. However, it's really vital to note that even with treatment, survivors almost invariably face long-lasting neurological damage and severe sleeplessness. Section 5. The Edge of Death. Persistent vegetative states and the survival of consciousness. Finally, let's zoom out from the extreme physical destruction of the body and the nervous system and look at the philosophical limits of the mind. When medical science keeps a biologically devastated body alive and a persistent vegetative state, we enter this really profound gray area between biology and psychology. When observing those hovering on this absolute edge of life and death, studies indicate that our perceptions of their consciousness are deeply tied to our own belief systems. Research found a high statistical correlation, an Rs of greater than 0.73, between the person's general index of religiosity and their specific belief that a human soul lives on after a person has died. This means that how you view the consciousness of someone in this state is likely deeply tied to your own personal belief systems about the afterlife. Ultimately, after exploring the absolute limits of physical torment, chemical destruction, and environmental survival throughout this explainer, we arrive here. It forces us to ponder this incredibly profound question. When extreme physiological trauma pushes the body into a persistent vegetative state, at what exact point does the biological machine stop? And if it does, where does the human soul go?